Hey everyone, you are listening to another episode of the All Things Private Practice Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick.Casale, joined today by my friend and colleague, Dr. Antoine Crosby. He is the founder of Affirmative Spaces in DC and a psychologist and just a really fucking cool person. And we're going to talk about a lot of things today, including intersectionality, showing up in spaces that need to be affirmative, training and mentoring more BIPOC clinicians in the LGBTQIA space, and all the things that come in between. So I think there's a lot of overlap to this conversation. So Tony, thank you so much for coming on and making time for this today.
Thank you for having me.
So I can tell you're nervous, and
You.
yeah, I can read the room a little bit when I know the
Yeah.
person. So this is your jam, right? Like this is what you do. This is what you're passionate about. You and I used to do coaching together, and
Yeah.
you came to our New Orleans retreat builder event in January. So I have a good sense of like really where your passion lies. And I follow you on social media. You show up in a big way. And we've kind of talked when you were creating affirmative spaces, like I think it was last year, and you wanted to create this group practice. There was a vision here. There was a desire to have more. I think what you told me is more people who look like you showing up in these spaces, ensuring that more BIPOC clinicians who are multiply marginalized, who also identify in the LGBTQIA population, are being supported because you are getting so many calls that you were like, I don't fucking know what to do because I don't want to turn these people away because there's no one else that I trust to send them to. But I'm only one human being. And here we are.
Here we are. So that is a phenomenal recap because that's exactly where I was and am. But I think like the inception of Affirmative Spaces actually came to me, the name actually came to me in a dream. I'm highly faith-based. I hold spirituality very true to my core being, even though I don't necessarily engage in all religious practices. But the name came to me in a dream and just kind of thinking about it, where people can come, people who look like me, people who hold multiple marginalized identities can come and show up and exist, and they can leave that shit at the door and just be able to show up as their full self without having to teach, without having to explain. They can just get in and get the healing and the joy they're needing. So that's how I came about. Opened it literally at the height of COVID, May 1st, 2020. So, when I reached out to you, I've noticing just getting an influx of calls, which I was grateful for and thankful for, right? And figuring out like how to see everybody, especially at the height of COVID. And so bringing people on and making the decision to be able to offer care and ensure that people actually have access to like quality mental health care is really the focal point of the practice.
I love that. And there's so much intention and care and thoughtfulness going into that. And I like that you said leaving that shit at the door, like having people who are showing up in society and often having to explain and educate and do all of this emotional labor for everybody else. So then to just have a place where you don't have to do any of that. And you can finally focus on what's going on for you, as I imagine so much is going on if you're existing in a world where that is your reality and that is very emotionally taxing. So to have a place that feels safe enough to just be yourself and to show up and feel safe enough to talk about things that are going on behind the scenes when you have to present a certain way in a lot of society.
And those identities like show up. It's not even something. So obviously that I specialize in working with BIPOC queer folks. That's like my specialty. Subspecialty Black fish men who have sex with other men. But even in that doesn't say because I identify as such, that doesn't mean I always get it, right? It doesn't mean that we are like our experiences are the same. There are, however, some things that I just get about being Black, some things I just get about being queer, some things I get just about being Black and queer, because that is its own identity. And so
layer here.
Exactly. And so I think being able to leave that at the door and like there's certain things, it's always interesting. So clients will, and I don't think intentionally, will like test me, like they might say something and be like, I'm like, oh, yeah, when you be X, Y, and Z, and they're like, oh, okay, bet, like, you know what it is. So, like, yeah, exactly. And so I think, and ensuring that I'm not putting the work, even if it's something that I come across and I don't know. I think there's a difference about being curious for their benefit versus being curious for like my own just wanting to know. And so if I don't know something, I will, I'll do a quick internal check and then I'll say, I'm curious, can you unpack that for me and let me know what that means? I just want to make sure I'm following along. And that has been like, I think extremely helpful, powerful in people being able to tell their stories and like share their experiences. Um, and just talk about things that they normally wouldn't talk about and realizing how their identities show up in all of these other spaces like you're listing, right? And so it shows up just not in the therapy space, but how do I navigate being Black in a spot or a space in corporate America or in a nonprofit agency where I'm like one of three Black people in an organization of 500?
Right.
How do I navigate being the only queer person, you know? And so seeing how these different identities show up in different subsets of their lives. Um, and that's probably even before we get to like familial and romantic relationships.
Yeah, I guess that well, there's so much to unpack here, but I love that you said just because I identify a certain way doesn't mean I always get it, right? Like that doesn't mean that I understand and get every single experience because I'm Black, because I'm queer. There's lots of layers to this, and there's lots of experience that is within experience. So it's very interesting and it's very complex. But I love that you're saying this because first and foremost, when you're out in society, right, in corporate America and nonprofit, like you named, in academia, wherever, in just life, it's obviously apparent when you walk into a room that you are a Black man. It's apparent to a lot of people, like how you identify. So immediately having to present a certain way in certain situations and having to sometimes often code switch too. Um, my wife does that all the time. There's like, as she would say, government white REL. There's Black REL. There's like, I'm with my family REL. So there's lots of having to navigate all of these situations. And I imagine, and obviously I can't relate, that is so fucking exhausting to have to do that.
One of the reasons why I opened up my own path, that was a little self-serving, just because I pride myself on being able to show up authentically, right? Like what you see is what you get. Like I'm Dr. C, I'm Tony, whatever, you want to call me, but I don't ever want it to be situations where if two people are talking about me, there are two different people showing up in the space, right? And so being able to just fully show up as myself in all spaces. And I think that helps like inform how I show up in the room with client and being able to be that authentic when I think about different interventions, when I think about different things, even how I say certain things to client.
Absolutely.
Just bringing that human component is so important. Like I am a whole human being. And one thing we know, I know we're talking about intersectionality. When we talk about like intersectionality, where it's about being able to always be your full self. And so if I have to pick which part of me can show up in any space, that's creating, like some internal distress. Before I even enter the situation, I'm already thinking about how I can show up, how my hair have to look, what am I going to wear, all of these things. I'm not prepared for the presentation. I'm not showing up in the space. I'm not engaged as a participant.
Right.
This all happens beforehand. So yeah, really trying to like mitigate that and making sure that you don't have to do that.
I love that you are naming that. And I'm wondering for you, I know you're a professor too, right? So you teach some um, psychologists. What's the word that I'm looking for? I know that you are helping with psychologists who are certainly coming into the workforce and helping them through their process. And I wonder how was that for you to say, I'm going to show up in all of these spaces as authentically as possible?
So I think that's been a journey. Shout out to my therapist over the
Yeah.
years. Um, because I think to be able to show up authentically means that I have to be okay with who I am. I have to love all parts of me, even the parts that are hard to love. And so I think that's been part of my journey and a continual journey, right? But I think I've reached a point of self love that I will not allow intentionally a situation or individual to dishonor me. I'm not going to allow you to do something to me that I wouldn't allow myself to do. And so I think that helps me personally ground myself in authenticity, speaking my mind, speaking my truth in all spaces. And so I think that translates in how I show up in therapy, but also how I show up as a professor and how I show up as a supervisor. And not saying that you have to show up as I show up, but who are you authentically? What's your authentic voice? Let's find that. Let's ground you and root you in that. Because at that point, you're unstoppable. Once you know who you are, that
Yeah.
and so I think that, knowing what it feels like to experience that and like walk and live and breathe that, I really want people to be able to experience that and find that for themselves.
It's powerful. How have you noticed a shift since being able to experience that for yourself? How have you noticed just how you show up differently and what that's like for you?
Think it means that I don't apologize. I know that sounds terrible. Well, meaning that I don't apologize for how I show up. I'll acknowledge, if I misstep and things of that nature. Um, but I don't, I'm not as uncomfortable taking up. It's still a work in progress. But leaning into like things that I've done, the things that I'm doing, like that is what I'm working towards. But also it allows me to like be unapologetic and bold in like my marketing campaigns and the demographic that I want to serve and that I choose to serve and being like unapologetic in that regard. Unapologetic in my research interests and specialties and how I teach my students. Um, I think that's how it shows up.
Does that feel freeing?
Liberating, yes,
Yeah.
because then I get to march to the beat of my own drum. And that's not to say other drums are important and I pay attention to other things. But I also am aware that like, I hold value. Don't necessarily, it's okay for me to trust and lean into that. Right?
Sounds like also having a stronger sense of self and feeling more grounded and confident in acknowledging like this is who I am and I love who I am. And I imagine that that can be really fucking hard to get to that place.
Yeah. So without making it a therapy session, but that's for me. I think that, so my journey of self-love has been one that has not been easy, right? So I am Black, shocking. I am queer, but I'm also a PK, preacher kid. And so grew up in the church, family's heavily religious. And so what that means is that didn't always leave space for my queerness, right? And even now I'm out with my family, but then it's this juxtaposition where it's like it's acknowledged by some, and then it's kind of like a don't ask, don't tell with that.
Right.
But anyway, the journey of self love and getting there had been like realizing like, yo, there's power in like who I am. There's value like in my queerness. There's nothing wrong with my queerness. There's nothing wrong with my Blackness. There's nothing wrong with my Black queerness. Because society would say that there's something wrong with any of those identities. And those are messages that over time I internalized.
Sure.
And depending on the space that I was in, choose which marginalized identity, there's precedent. And so I think over the years, through therapy, through self-reflection, through re-engaging in my own spiritual path and relationship with my higher power, I think that allowed me to not only discover, but also like embrace and internalize that self-love.
I love that. And it sounds like it's been quite the journey. And it's got to be, like you mentioned, feel like liberation for sure. And then just, I imagine, and I don't know the behind the scenes, right? But I know how you show up on social media. I know the impact you're having on your community. And I imagine there are a lot of people who are very thankful that you are embracing authenticity and showing up the way that you show up and help the way that you help. And I'm curious about how that has led to the desire to create a group structure because again, coming back to it is like you can only do so much as one human being.
So the desire to create and expand to the group practice really was fueled by the amount of referrals that I was receiving. So
I
from
remember because you were
colleagues,
telling me in the moment, you're like, I could see 75 people this fucking week if I wanted to. Like, please
yeah,
don't do that. Please do not do that to yourself.
no, 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 no. And even when I was starting, I was seeing about between like 28 and 30-ish,
Yeah.
um, which was just not sustainable, right? But because I realized like the need. And so I was blessed and fortunate, have been blessed and fortunate in that a lot of referrals come from clients, a lot of referrals from current clients, a lot of empaths, a lot of referrals come from colleagues. I have a Psychology Today page, but like it's been off for the
Right.
greater part of a year. But realizing like there are people who need help and there's literal value in sitting across from someone who looks like you. And
Absolutely.
so my goal and mission with Affirmative Spaces is to really build that faith, build that infrastructure where you can be seen, you can be heard. There are certain things that you just will not have to explain, right? And then you can just exist fully. And you don't have to wonder if this is a safe haven for you. This is a safe haven for you. And safety doesn't mean that we're not going to miss the mark, that we're going to have missteps. We
Sure.
will have that. But the safety is in being able to name them, being able to like process them, unpack them, and recalibrate. And so
Love that.
that's really what I hope to like build by bringing on, new postdocs and other staff so that we can really drive this mission forward because as BIPOC queer folk, we have a lot that happens to us, a lot that is outside of our control, from, high level, systemically, with laws and things of that nature, even down, to the individual level with families and relationships. And so if for 50 minutes out of the week, you can come process that shit in a space that's designed for you, that is what we are trying to do and really bring healing and like create what I like to call like some ripples. So if you're coming in, getting healing and unpacking and releasing your traumas and your pain and moving to your joy, you're going to go out and that's going to impact how you show up in the community. And that's going to ripple and ultimately change the community overall.
Mm. It's powerful.
Mm.
Where are we at these days in terms of have you hired anyone yet? Not to put you on the spot about this, but I am curious.
So I currently have one postdoc. So I started slow.
That was the word I was looking for before, by the way. I was like, I fucking knew the word.
Oh,
Used it so many times when we worked
yeah.
together. I lost it.
So
Okay.
my postdoc, so people who recently completed their doctorate in
Yep.
psychology for as a way for them to get their hours before licensure. So I have one right now. I'm in the process of bringing on two more that who will start in the fall. So
Okay.
we'll be up to three. And then seeing how that goes, I might bring on like a fourth or fifth one mid at the top of the year 2024. So
That's
we'll see.
exciting.
Yeah.
How does it feel to see that vision start to become reality?
It's a bit anxiety inducing and surreal at the same time.
Yeah.
Cause there's so much that goes into it that, I mean, and we talked about this, right? And thinking about all of it, like when it was just me, it was like, okay, I know I do these things. These are my forms. This is fine. It's just me. But now I'm like, oh, there are other people. There are policies and procedures. There's a standard. We have to, like, there's the practice standard that we have to have that I was upholding.
Yep.
But I have to now communicate that to other people. So, so that piece, and really wanting to protect the integrity of the brand and excuse me, of the mission,
Absolutely.
because I don't want myself, business, or anyone associated or affiliated with the business to enact any harm.
Yeah. And it sounds like that's something that absolutely cannot be sacrificed in this mission. Like
Oh,
whoever we hire, right? As group practice owners, you're always thinking about the reputation, the integrity, and maintaining value, maintaining your value structure that you've created. And
Hmm.
I think it is even more impactful when you are trying so hard to be mission focused and driven towards supporting marginalized communities. Like there's I imagine that can feel like a lot of pressure. Like there's no room for this like error or potential fuck up that can happen if someone is just not in alignment with the values of this culture that we've created.
And if you're not in alignment, we will find you somewhere else to go.
Right. It's not gonna be here.
It will not be here because really, this is my vision,
Yep,
but greater than that, this is my community.
exactly.
And, we've experienced enough harm. We don't need any more.
Yeah.
And so we want to make sure that we're bringing peace and healing. And so if it's not for you, that's okay.
But it's not
But
gonna
you
last
can't
long.
cause harm. No.
It's an interesting thought to go from like, I'm just doing my own thing. I know my policies and procedures and I know my processes to bringing someone on because it's like, oh, it's almost like this weird feeling of like, now it's a business because someone works here. That isn't me.
You have to call me and ask me about certain things. I have to do payroll. I have to review your note.
Right.
It's these things that you have to do, but then when you are actually doing them, you're like, oh yeah, like I own a business.
Yeah. It makes it
Exactly.
feel a bit more real. It also feels like there's an extra layer of responsibility in a way.
Hmm.
Because I know for myself, and I'm interested to see how a year from now, how affirmative spaces looks for you. If it's 3 postdocs, if it's 10, if it's who knows. I remember hiring my first clinician, who is a friend of mine, who's still with me 2.5 years later, thinking like, okay, I'll hire one person, and now I just interviewed to hire my 20th today, and like,
Wow.
it's just a matter of like, if you can continuously have a ripple effect, because our mission is really to support the neurodivergent community at large. And if we can continue to bring on neurodiverse affirmative care, I'm like, why would I say no to this if we can continue to support more people? But it's a fine line because it can get from like 1 to 20, and then you're thinking, what the fuck comes next? And I don't know. It's scary.
Yeah. It's a lot to think to your point. It's a lot to think about. And it feels like it can keep growing because of the impact that we want to have on our community. And so you're
Yeah.
like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Then it's also like, hey, and
And you
then
need
what
like,
does that mean? Hmm?
exactly, tiers of leadership and more structure and organization. And you don't want to lose sight of why this was created in the first place. Like that's always something that comes to mind with growth is like you you really want to operate from a place of alignment in terms of the populations you really want to serve, but also not only serve but protect. And I think that is so crucial when you're talking about intersectionality and marginalized community, of saying like first and foremost the protection of the community comes first. And that creates this differentiation in thinking about business ownership, because policy, procedure, culture, hiring, everything has to be in alignment.
Because it is so, so, so important. And to the point, like intersectionality, when I'm realizing in this moment right now, it's like it's not, I mean, I've been feeling this, but to put language to it, it's not separate. Like it is my business in a way, but it's like it's also not. Like it's my community. Like I see clients out, we might frequent similar settings,
Exactly.
which I disclose to them from session one, like, hey, we're members of the same community. The community like this big. So
Right.
we'll probably see each other out and about.
For
But
sure.
yeah, it's part of my life. It's who I am. So wants to like protect that whole.
I just did an episode. My last episode that came out was with Elizabeth McCorvey, who's um, a BIPOC therapist here in Asheville, and we were talking about the mental health industrial complex and just the realization of like mental health private practice care is a privilege, right? Like to come to a private practice setting, to have the ability to pay for services or whatever the case may be. There's privilege in the ability to do that, but it takes so much more than just 50 minutes of session time to heal, and it takes a community at large to heal. And I think the mental health profession as a whole has really gotten away from that concept of like it's more than just one-on-one therapy. Like that's great, it's wonderful, but at the same time, communities healing together are also important. So the work that you're doing, like you mentioned that ripple effect, that's healing a community. Like that
Mhm.
is so big. I don't know if you're able to take that in, but I just think that watching and witnessing it is pretty incredible.
Yeah, that I hadn't, it's input. Thank you for that. Hadn't actually thought about it like that. But as you were saying, it was like settling in because I agree, like community is huge and community is such a powerful healing agent, especially with like BIPOC communities. We don't tend to do one-on-one, right?
Right.
Um, so to hear you frame it in that way is like grounding and settling. So thank you for that.
Well, I just want to say as a friend and colleague, I'm really fucking proud of what you're creating. And from day one, when you told me what your vision was, I was like, holy shit. And I felt honored that you sought me out to work together because I think, you know, there is obviously, we always have to acknowledge race and we always have to acknowledge that there's a differentiate or difference in privilege. And you mentioned something that kind of struck something in my head while you were talking about like wanting people to sit across from you who look like you. And I think about like telehealth and how that's really increased access to be able to do that. Because when my wife was looking for a therapist here in Asheville, it was like, we might have 4 Black providers. And if it's not a good fit, then you're like kind of stuck with whoever you can get.
Yeah.
Now with telehealth, it's like, well, we have the entirety of the state to have access to care. So I think that's also really helpful. Um, but I know you live in DC, so there's a higher percentage of people who are Black and who are African American. And the ability to show up in your community with people who look like you, I just think that is so, so important because I think relatability is accessibility in therapy. And I
Mm.
think the ability to, like you said, leave that shit at the door, it doesn't even have to be spoken. That is so powerful.
It, I mean, even being on the other side, like as a client, like there is something about not having to assess for safety in that way.
Sure.
And so, yeah, like being like here in DC, I think there is, well, I'll say this, even being in DC, there's still not, there's a higher concentration of Black providers, but it's still relatively low, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, I also want to like create that, like having more Black providers, having more BIPOC providers. And that's just, so I think, not I think, the business is actually like two-tiered or two-pronged in that approach. It's like showing up for the community in this way, but also like changing the face of like mental wellness and mental health and psychology and what the face of that looks like. Because for so long, it hasn't been inclusive of people who look like us.
For sure. I
Yeah.
think that because you provide mentorship in your in what you're trying to do with these postdocs, I think that's also huge because then people know I have a safe place to go and work. That's huge too. Like having culture built in and making sure that things are affirmative and anti-racist and anti-oppressive. Like it's more than just wording, right? So like just for you to show up the way that you show up, I imagine a lot of these folks who are coming out of their programs are like feeling a relief if they think I have a place I can land safely.
Want to like when I guess use business wanted to like create that safe space. That was actually something I had during my internship when I was at Howard. That was the first time through all my years of training. That was the first time I was in a space where all of my supervisors were Black. The vast majority of the students who I saw were of the African diaspora. It was those feelings in a way to just be able to exist, to not worry about, you know, hair and I have dreadlocks and like, is that going to be okay? Is that going to be a thing that's going to come up? Just those nuanced, people call them microaggressions. I don't believe any aggressions are micro. But the macroaggression that we
Sure.
experience out in the world and just like not have to deal with that was so powerful and healing in a way that I didn't even know I needed at the time. And so, yeah, I just really want to be able to like create that moving forward. There was space for my blackness, there was space for my queerness at Howard. Um, and that in and of itself allowed me to show up differently in the way that I was able to do the work.
That makes complete sense to me. I imagine that anyone listening to this right now is going to be like, "What's Tony's email address? I really need a place to work in the DC area." So I just want to highlight that when we're talking about 1 to 3 postdocs in the next couple of months, I'm like thinking, "Damn, this could really turn into like a collective. This could really turn into something really fucking cool."
I welcome it from your lip 5 years. Wow. um, so my email address is Dr. Crosby at affirmativespaces.com. Where you can reach me via email. We are rebuilding the website right now. It should be done in a couple of weeks, actually. So it's www.affirmativespaces.com. And then also, if you want to see my clinical work and how I work clinically and approach rather, you can search me on Psychology Today.
Don't do that because
Uh,
Tony's not taking more clients on.
I am not.
Me trying to protect him from himself. Uh, uh, no, in all seriousness, that's fantastic, and I love the logo too. Like, I love what you've created, and everything you're doing is really powerful. And just keep creating these ripples because these ripples become currents. These currents become community changing events and community healing as well taking place. So, really, really incredible stuff. Anything you want to leave the audience with or share before we end?
Well, I want to thank you for inviting me onto this platform. Like amazing. So thank you for that. I would just encourage like anyone who's doing this work, anyone who's thinking about pursuing it, is that authenticity is so important, both from a provider side and a client side. Just show up as yourself because there is something very healing about not having to pretend.
I agree
Yeah.
100%. I think that it's helpful not only for the provider to show up as their best self, but it's helpful for the client in terms of building rapport and trust and safety. And it also models that you can show up in different spaces as yourself and in the mental health space, in the community, etc. And I think that is a really powerful message to send to people who are really struggling to just feel okay with being themselves in any capacity. So really thank you for the message today and the conversation. This was really enjoyable and I think people will get a lot out of it for sure.
Thank you so much. I would also add my Instagram. I forgot to mention it. Sorry.
For sure.
So you can follow me on Instagram at doc with lock underscore. So DOC with LOCS underscore. Because I'm Dr. Lock.
Love it. All of that information that Tony just shared will be in the show notes. So you have easy access to Affirmative Spaces if you're interested in looking what they're doing, the Instagram account so you can follow on social media and just follow the journey. And for everyone listening to the All Things Private Practice podcast, new episodes are out every single week on all major platforms, YouTube as well. Like, download, subscribe, share, doubt yourself, do it anyway, and we'll see you next week.